In today's lesson we're going to look at drawing out the passive detail for the eaves of a roof. So what we have here, this is done in block construction. So we have an outer leaf of 100, we have a cavity of 250 mils, and then we have an inner leaf of 100 mils. We have an insulated block in this location here. What we have then is we have a wall plate up here, a standard wall plate of 100 by 75. We also have another wall plate positioned here to take the weight of this rafter because of the wider cavity now. And what we also have here is a lot more insulation. So we have 300 insulation in the attic here, we have rigid insulation between the rafter, and then we've rigid insulation finishing off the top of the cavity here in the wall. And then also we have an insulated plasterboard on the underneath of the ceiling here. So to start off this drawing, we'll begin with the wall. So to begin with the wall, what we're going to do is measure out 100 mils. So this is going to be drawn scale 1:5, so I measure out 20 mils here, then I measure out 50 mils, and then another 20 mils here. So this will be all drawn to scale 1:5. So to draw up the blocks here, the blocks are up 215 plus a 10 mil space for the mortar, then up 215 again. And then when I get to this stage here, what I tend to do is draw my lines across here so I can show where the gaps in the blockwork are. So that's my outer leaf done. Now to do my inner leaf. Now above the inner leaf, what we have is we have another 10 mil gap here. So we measure that here, and then we measure up another 215. And this is for our lightweight insulated block. And then it's a good idea at this stage then to start drawing in symbols for the blockwork. So the symbol for the blockwork is, I tend to use two lines at 60 degrees close together. And then we do the inner block here. I just staggered over two blocks in this case here. And then for the insulated block we do it slightly different so we can see that it's a different type of block. So I'm going to draw a series of lines at 60 degrees. So that we can see that there's two types of blocks drawn here. Now, from here then, we're going to draw a wall plate. Now, the wall plate is 100 by 75, the same in passive construction. So what we're doing here is measuring up 75. And again, remember, this is scale 1:5, so we're measuring up 100 or 15, and we're measuring across here 20. Now, because it's a wall plate, we know it's a piece of timber, so we're looking at the end grain, so we put in the symbol for the end grain, which is an X. Next, we're going to draw in the rafter. So, to draw in the rafter, we start at the edge of the wall plate, the outer edge, top left hand corner, and we draw a line here at 30 degrees. So this is the same for any pitch roof drawing, that we start off here. Or we bring down this line 30 degrees. Now we set up a line here at 60 degrees, And then what we're going to do is measure our rafter. So our rafter is 150, so we're going to be drawing it 300, so we measure out 20 and measure down 10. That gives us our top and bottom. So what that allows us now to do is we can draw in the bottom of the rafter. So this here is the bottom of the rafter, and then I'll continue on the bottom of the rafter. I might leave a small gap here because I'm not sure where the wall plate's going to intersect with it, and then I'm not going to bring it down here fully because I want to see how far out we're going to put our soffit and fascia. Now, while we mention soffit and fascia, we might as well do a bit of measuring for it. So what we'll do in this case here, we'll put on soffit and fascia of 300 mils. So what we're going to do is measure out 300, bring a line up, and that line up where it intersects with this first line that we drew at 30 degrees, bring a line in here. So that gives us our bottom of our rafter here. And again, it'll also give us the top of the rafter now because we can extend on this line down. So what we've now found is the top of the rafter here. And how that's found again is from the wall, measure out your 300 mils, bring a light line up where it cuts into this 30 degree line, bring a line across from it, bring a line up, and that gives us our plumb cut and our seat cut in the bottom of our rafter. So we can draw in the end of the rafter here. Then we could draw in the top of the rafter in a bit heavier now. And we'll extend this up. Wait. Now, with the rafter drawn in, we can draw in our second wall plate. So our second wall plate, again, it's the same size, 75 by 100, so that'll be 15 by 20 on your drawing. So you can see where it's cutting into this rafter here. And again, because it's a wall plate, we'll show the in grain, so I'll X through this here. Now, once we get to this stage, better start putting in some insulation. So the first piece of insulation I tend to put in this drawing is into the wall here. So I'm going to put in the rigid insulation. So this here is 50 mil rigid insulation. So we'll measure up a line 50 here. So where I measure this from is from the bottom of the wall plate here, up 50, and that's our piece for rigid insulation. So to draw in rigid insulation, what we do here is lines here at 45 degrees. Now you could measure how far apart these are, but there's no real need. And then 45 degrees here. So this here is our symbol for rigid insulation. Now underneath it now we have loose insulation. So again, the symbol for loose insulation then is more freehand curves. So it's wide here, gets narrow here, wide, narrow, and so on down along. So this just takes a bit of practice here drawing in these. And so on down to the bottom section of the wall that we've drawn in. So that's our loose insulation put in. Now if we move up along the drawing then, what we have to do is we have to put in some rigid insulation and some loose insulation. So basically when we get to this stage here, what I tend to do is I tend to draw in my ceiling joist. So my ceiling joist, as in a normal not passive construction, your ceiling joist will be resting on top of your wall plate. So I can draw this in here, and we're going to take it in this question here that there's no room upstairs, so we're going to put in the same size timber as we have for the rafter, so up 150 for the timber. So what we're going to do here now is draw a line across here. So this here is our ceiling joist now put in. Now in this drawing here we're super insulating this house, so what we have to do in this case here is put on battens first of all. So the battens here are measuring across here 50, so we're going to measure across here 50, going to measure down here 25, so we're counter battening this roof here. So in this case here we're counter battening here, and then below this then we're going to put on, now we're going to go 400 centers. So from the center this one to the center this is 400, so it'll be 80 on your drawing. Then we'll measure across 50, then we'll do the same this one here, measure over 400, and what we'll do here then is line up here, line up here, line up here, bring our lines across here. So these are our battens that are 50 by 25. Once we've that done, we'll draw a line across here to show the top of the insulated plasterboard. Then we're going to measure down 50. Draw a line across here. And then down 12 mil, which will be probably close to 50 mil, so probably down about 3 mil on your drawing here. Draw a line across here, and that's actually our plasterboard. Now, so, and we're at this stage, we might as well put in the plaster on the wall here. So we'll measure out 15 mil. So we draw our plaster on our wall now. So we have our plaster on our wall put in. Now we might as well put in a few symbols now for insulation. So again, this is going to be rigid insulation. So again, at 45 here. Now this can be done in pencil. I tend to draw it in pen just so that it stands out. Now you just have to be a bit careful when you're drawing it in pen. And then just 45 degrees in the opposite direction here then. Now you could put in as many of these as you want and as close together as you want. So that's our rigid insulation put in for our plasterboard. Now when we're at this stage here, we're as well to put in our airtight seal. Because it's passive construction, we have to have this house airtight. So our airtight seal is an angle here of 90 degrees. So it's a tape that's put onto the wall and put into this location, so here, so it's taped in here so that any heat from this room here gets to this point here and won't travel any further. Okay, so what it is, that's our airtight seal, and that's where we place it in our drawing. Next we'll look at putting in some rigid insulation now into the actual rafter, because once we have the rigid insulation put in, we can start putting in the loose insulation. Loose insulation is a lot easier to put in. So on the drawing here, I'm going to measure down 30 mil, pick a point there, then with my 30 degree set square, going to draw a line here, so this is going to be a heavy line. And what we're going to do in this case here is we're going to put in 60 mil of insulation. So from this point here in the wall plate, I'm going to measure out 60 mil, bring a line straight up, and then to find the lower point here, bring it level with the seat cut on the end of the rafter. So what we have here is, that's the end point here for that rigid insulation. And again, as I said, the insulation was 60 mil, so I'm going to measure my 60 mil here. Now what we don't have in this drawing here is an eaves ventilator. Now the reason we've no eaves ventilator in this drawing here is we're going to have a gap along here. Now you'll see it a lot clearer when I put in the symbol for the insulation here. So what we have here is we've no eaves ventilator in this drawing question because of the way we're putting in the insulation. So again, this is our rigid insulation. So there's quite a lot of rigid insulation in this question here. So put in our lines here. So what we have to do is all the way up along our drawing here. So that's our rigid insulation now put into our drawing. Now when we're that much done, we can start putting in loose insulation. So the loose insulation in the attic, there's going to be 300 mils of it. So first of all, we start off placing it in here, and obviously it's done in layers. So what it is, it's packed up along here. So the first one goes up to the top of the ceiling joist. And again, symbol here. It just takes a bit of time to get used to drawing it, going wide and narrow, as you're putting it in here. So that's 150 mil insulation. So what we have to do now is draw in another 150 mil above it. So on our drawing here, we'll measure up 150 mils. Draw a light line across here, because the heavy line is for the timber. So what we're going to do is start here somewhere again. So this here is our final piece of insulation in our attic. So we've all this section now filled with insulation. Next we have more insulation to put in. So the last piece of insulation we put in is all this section here has to be filled with insulation. So again, this is going to be loose insulation. So again, if we go wide, then narrow, wide, narrow, and so on. Right, so that's all our insulation. Now, that completes all the insulation in this drawing. So what you'll notice now is this house is super insulated. So this is what it's called super insulated when we put in this much insulation into the drawing. Now to move on from there, what we're going to do is, again, another detail that's found in passive houses, we have a vapor barrier. Now a vapor barrier is basically a sheet of plastic that is put between the ceiling joist and the actual ceiling itself. So what we have here is, it's a sheet of plastic going across here. Now the reason it's put in is vapor. If we think of vapor, we think of water vapor. We don't want any water vapor getting up onto this loose insulation, because if this loose insulation gets any moisture in it from, say, water vapor, say for instance in, we'll say, a bathroom or a kitchen, what it's going to be is it's going to leave this insulation not as effective as it should be. So this here is the location for our vapor barrier placed in along here. So it's just a yellow line on our drawing here. Now we move on from here, we'll take a look at dealing with the actual soffit and fascia over in this location here, and we'll start putting on a few tiles onto the roof and bit of maybe felt as well, or breather membrane, which is now used, and we'll put in, well, say, our gutter as well. Now, so to start drawing in these details here, the first detail we'll put in here is a line going across here. This here is the top of our soffit, so we'll measure down here then, and we'll say it's a 20mm piece. So we're going to measure down here 4mm. So this here is our soffit put in. Now what we'll do here is we'll just draw another line here, or a series of lines here. What the series of lines here will show where the vent is. So what we have here is we've a vent here allowing air to go up through here and vent the whole roof, so that we've no likelihood of dry rot occurring in our roof. Now next thing then is we measure out another 20mm here, and we measure out for our fascia. So measuring out for our fascia here, two light lines. Now we'll bring it down maybe 20mm past. Now measurement here is not that important, how far down we bring it past. Then we'll bring it out here, and normally on the bottom of the fascia what you'll notice is that there's a few rounded mouldings here. So what we'll do here, just a few rounded mouldings here, just to show a design on the bottom. And then to get the top of the fascia here, what we'll do here is, now again, measurement not crucially important, we'll measure up 10mm in this case here. So we'll measure up here 10mm. Now bring a line across here. Now what we'll do in this location here is we'll draw in a sloping line here. Now the sloping line here is actually a really important piece. What that is, that's called a tilting fillet. So this piece of timber cut in this triangular shape here, tilting fillet, and its main function is to stop the breather membrane from sinking down into this gap here. So you'll see now I'll draw in the breather membrane. So in this drawing here we'll draw it in maybe in a blue pen so that it's different to the rest of the drawing. So to draw in the breather membrane, now this used to be referred to as felt, but now in all roofs now felt is no longer used, it's all breather membrane. So it's this blue line going across here, so it's on top of our rafter, and then what it is, it goes on top of our tilting fillet, out across the fascia, and then sags down here. Now what happens here then is it goes into the gutter out at the end of the sheet here. So we'll be able to draw in the gutter now in a few minutes. Now next we'll start measuring out for our tiles. So we'll put tiles on this roof. So what we're going to do here is, for the first point here, from the corner of our fascia, measure up 300 mils. So make a mark there, and then from that mark measure up 300 again. So on the 300 mark we're going to put in our battens. So in this case here, because we're putting in tiles, we're going to, from this 300 point, measure down here 25 mil, up 25 mil, and then measure out here 35 mil. So remember, all of these are to scale measurements. So anytime I mention a measurement, you just divide it by 5. So I'm measuring out here 35 mil, which on my drawing is going to be 7. So what I've drawn here is our first batten here, and what you'll notice is, for tiles, they're slightly larger than, say, if we're slating the roof. So this batten here is 50 by 35. Now that's the first one, and the reason I drawn the first one is, if I bring a light line up now, I'll get the top of the next couple battens. So what I'll tend to do in this is maybe drawing another 2 or 3 more battens in here. So again, measuring my 50 mil, and then what I'll do is measure up here my 300. I might measure up 300 once more. And because I have the roof drawn at 30 degrees, I'm able to use my set square now at 60 degrees to draw in these battens a lot quicker. Then we draw in the top of these battens. I did put in X's to show that it's ingrained, that we're looking at, that these are running along in and out towards the drawing, so the same direction as the wall plates are. So that's our battens placed in. Now the next thing that we have to place in our drawing is actually our tiles. So measurements for tiles are 420. So 420 by 20 mil in thickness. So basically on this drawing they're going to be measuring, we'll say 84 mils. So to do this on your drawing, what I tend to do here is go from this point here. So measure down 400 mils. So this here is measuring down 400 mils. So it's 80 on your set square. So measure down here 400 mils. Now, because I know this is 84, I'm going to measure back here another 4 mils back here. Now this is quite an important 4 mils here. Now, what we're going to do here is measure out here 4 mils on your drawing. And somewhere up here, measure out 4 mils on your drawing. What we'll do is set up a light line then on top of this. And what we've now created is created the end of the tile here. Now on the drawing here, because we know it's 84 mils up, we can now measure up our 84. So again, it's 420 when we're drawing it. Then this here is measuring down. In this question here, it'd be 8 mils on your drawing. In reality, it's down 40 mil in real life. And that's our first tile placed on. So that's our first tile placed on. Now it's a matter of repeating the process maybe twice more. So again, from this point here, measure down 400. So 80 on your set square. Pick a point here. Now we can draw this line in heavy this time. Then on this line, measure out your 20 mils for the thickness. So 4 on your set square. Measure out your 4 mils again up here. That allow you to draw this point here, and then from this point measure up your 84 So that gives you the top of your tile. Then down here again 8 mils. Now, the way, as you can see on the drawing here, the way the tiles are put onto the roof is they clip onto the back of the batten. So there's an extra piece onto a tile that clips down over the batten. That isn't present when we're dealing with slate. Slates are just completely level, but the difference between slates is that they rest on 3 battens, and the battens are far closer together as well. So it's different measurements, and when you're drawing out slate on a drawing like this, you don't tend to see the size of the slate because they're a lot smaller than the tiles here. So tiles are 20 mils made from concrete. So that's 3 tiles, and it's just a matter of repeating this. Now, technically in an exam, normally they just ask for maybe the first 2 or 3 rows of tiles, that you won't have to do it all the way up along the roof. So these here are the tiles placed in. Now, a couple more items to finish on the drawing here. What we'll do in this case here is we'll put in our gutter. So our gutter is out at the end of the page here, so I haven't left a lot of room here for it, but it should still fit. So again, in old drawings, what you tend to see is you tend to see a gutter that's measured, drawn in as a round. Now, what I tend to do is from here measure out 300. So that means that it's 150, and then from the bottom here measure down 100 mil. So we draw a light line here. And what I tend to do is take the set square, tilt it at a slight angle, and then drawing maybe a double line at the back here just to show where the gutter is. So this here is the design for the gutter here. Like in a lot of the books they show rounded gutters, but there's very few houses now that have rounded gutters on them. Now, when we've this done, we've 1 or 2 other details to put in. What we'll do in this case here is, instead of putting in some drawings, you'll see a batten put in here. So you have a batten put in here. So I'll just sketch in a batten in here, right? A small batten in here. We'll say it's 25 mil by 40 mil and put in an X here. That's one method of holding up the soffit. Another method of holding up a soffit is if we use this Soffit Ladder here. So basically what a Soffit Ladder is, it's another piece of timber. So piece of timber 75. Now, location here doesn't really make a lot of difference where you place it in here, and we measure up here 75 again. Now, and basically what we have is we have a right angle, 2 pieces of timber here making a right angle, so that we can nail up this soffit up onto that. So this here is called a Soffit Ladder. Okay, now it will be placed onto about every 3 or 4 rafters. You wouldn't place this on every rafter, there's no need. Now, when we're looking at the drawing here, what we'll also do is put in a bit of plaster on the outside. So again, we'll put in maybe 15-20 mil of plaster on the outside. So on our drawing here, place in here. Now, for plaster, we might as well put in a few dots here, just to show that it's plaster on the outside. So this will be referred to as render on your drawing. And then while we're doing this, we might as well put in a wall tie in here. Now, the wall tie that's done in passive construction is made from basalt. Now, the reason it's made from basalt is it's far less conducting properties. So in most of our houses we have steel wall ties. What we have here is a basalt, so that the heat doesn't transfer out through this drawing here, or out through the building here. So what we have here is made from basalt. Now this finishes off the drawing, and this is just the eaves. So sometimes you might be asked to put in a purline, so if you have to put in a purline, you just measure up on your drawing and locate where the purline is. But this here is just the eaves detail of a passive roof. Now the next thing here to do is to make out a legend. So the best place to make out a legend on this one here is this location here. You've got plenty space here, and basically to start off with the legend here, start someplace on the drawing and then work your way to the other part of the drawing. So like if I go here, I'm going to go number 1 here for render, 2 here, 3, this here is, we'll say 4, then 5, say 6, and so on, and throughout the whole drawing place in them numbers. Then what we'll put in here is number 1, and then in neat capital writing. Right, it's the best way of doing to make it look neat is if you put it in blocks. So we're going to write in render, and we'll say the render is 20 mils in this drawing here. Then go to outer leaf, 100 mils, and so on throughout the whole drawing. So this here is with the legend finished. So what you'll see is there's actually 25 parts to this drawing, so I've it labelled 1 to 25. So, and it's not hugely important what order you put them in. For example, I left the plaster here, one of the last things I put in here, plaster 15 mil, and then for example if you forget to label something, it's very easy, just stick a number on it then and put it in here. So this here is it labelled 1 to 25, and then final thing is just put the name of the drawing. So this here is the eaves detail of a passive roof with block construction. So the other type of question that could come up here is which timber frame inner wall. So that's slightly different drawing, but the insulation levels are about the same.